Elias Thorne had a gift for seeing potential where others saw only raw materials. He built Thorne Labs from a garage startup into a pharmaceutical powerhouse, driven by innovation and an almost intuitive understanding of chemistry, not just of compounds but of people. At the heart of his trusted inner circle was Julian Vance, his head of R&D, a brilliant but often erratic mind whom Elias had mentored, defended, and ultimately brought in as a minority partner. They were a potent mix. Elias, the visionary strategist and alchemist of business. Julian, the volatile genius capable of groundbreaking discoveries. Their relationship was forged in late nights, shared dreams, and a bond Elias believed was unbreakable, stronger than any molecule. Until the day it shattered. The betrayal was swift and brutal, a perfectly executed corporate coup. Julian, leveraging his control over key research data and exploiting Elias's recent personal tragedy. The sudden, unexplained death of his wife struck when Elias was most vulnerable. Julian fabricated evidence of financial mismanagement, colluded with ambitious board members Julian had secretly cultivated, and within weeks, Elias was ousted, stripped of his company, his patents, his reputation, and his fortune. He was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the profound, gut-wrenching ache of betrayal that went deeper than any financial ruin. It was a violation of soul. The world Elias knew dissolved. He became a ghost, his name smeared, his legacy stolen. He lived in the shadows, the pain a constant, dull roar in his chest, fueled by the gnawing question of his wife's death, which Julian seemed entirely too dismissive of during the coup. Grief and anger became his unwelcome companions, but slowly, something else began to emerge from the wreckage of his life. A cold, hard clarity. He watched Julian from afar, saw him transform Thorne Labs into Vance Pharma, expanding aggressively, basking in the stolen glory, his face plastered on magazines, the picture of success built on Elias's ruin. Julian lived a life of obscene luxury, oblivious to the shadow patiently watching him, learning his habits, his vulnerabilities, his fears. Elias didn't plot revenge in a fit of rage. He designed it like a complex chemical reaction, each step precise, irreversible, and leading to a predictable, devastating outcome. He spent years researching not just Julian's business empire, but the man himself. He learned about Julian's hidden insecurities, his addiction to control, his desperate need for validation, and his Achilles heel. His son, Adrian, a fragile young man prone to anxiety, shielded from the world by Julian's overbearing protection. Elias began his work subtly. He didn't attack Vance Pharma directly, not yet. Instead, he focused on the ecosystem Julian had built around himself. Using what little hidden resources he could access from before the coup, and leveraging skills honed over decades in the cutthroat world of pharmaceuticals, Elias started planting seeds of disruption in Julian's carefully cultivated network of suppliers, distributors, and political allies. It was slow, painstaking work, requiring patience and an almost invisible touch. A small, untraceable fluctuation in the price of a key raw material here. A carefully leaked rumor about a minor regulatory issue there. A whisper of discontent among a distant supplier chain. Each step was designed not to cripple Vance Pharma, but to create tiny, almost imperceptible stresses, forcing Julian to divert attention and resources, creating microfractures in the foundation of his empire. While Julian was busy patching these tiny cracks, Elias was preparing the main event. He knew that destroying Julian's business wasn't enough. He had to unravel the man himself. The core of Elias's plan centered on Julian's obsession with control and his pathological fear of losing his son. Elias meticulously researched Adrian's life, his school, his few friends, his medical history. He discovered Adrian suffered from a rare, debilitating autoimmune disorder, requiring constant monitoring and expensive, specialized medication developed initially within Thorne Labs, a proprietary formula Julian now owned. This was the key. Elias spent years developing a variant of Adrian's medication, not a cure, but something far more insidious. He used his old contacts, people loyal to the memory of Thorne Labs before Julian's takeover, to set up a clandestine operation. They synthesized the modified compound, ensuring it was chemically almost identical to Adrian's current medication, undetectable by standard tests. Its effect wasn't immediately harmful. Instead, it subtly altered the medication's efficacy over time, making Adrian's condition slowly, almost imperceptibly, worsen, introducing new, baffling symptoms that Julian's doctors couldn't explain. Elias orchestrated a scenario where this modified medication, packaged indistinguishably from Adrian's usual supply, was introduced into Julian's secure delivery chain. It was a masterstroke of misdirection and patience. As Adrian's health declined, Julian became frantic, pouring billions into research, blaming his Randy teams, trusting no one. He demanded constant updates, micromanaged Adrian's medical care, his control spiraling into paranoia. The microfractures Elias had created earlier now served their purpose. Julian's focus was entirely on his son, leaving his sprawling business empire vulnerable to the next phase of Elias's plan. Elias didn't want Julian dead or in prison. He wanted Julian to suffer the same suffocating loss Elias had endured, the loss of control, the fear for what you hold dearest, the gnawing uncertainty that eats you alive. He wanted Julian to taste the bitter ash of his own making. The final stages unfolded with terrifying precision. While Julian was consumed by Adrian's worsening health crisis, Elias launched a coordinated attack on Vance Pharma's stock price. Using a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, he began shorting the stock heavily, coinciding with a carefully orchestrated media campaign. Not scandalous exposes, but subtle, factual reports highlighting the unexplained challenges facing Vance Pharma's Randy, Adrian's baffling illness, and strategic missteps in global markets, the earlier disruptions Elias had caused. The market, already spooked by Julian's erratic behavior and the whispers of trouble within the company, reacted violently. The stock price plummeted. Julian, tearing himself away from Adrian's bedside, was met with financial chaos. His empire was crumbling, but his focus remained primarily on his son. He hired the best doctors, the best security teams to guard Adrian's medication, oblivious that the problem lay within the medication itself, delivered by a ghost he had long forgotten. The twist came when Julian, in a desperate attempt to understand Adrian's condition, ordered a full spectral analysis of the current batch of medication Adrian was taking. The results were baffling. Minor, almost insignificant chemical variances were detected, dismissed initially as manufacturing anomalies. But Julian, driven by paranoia, pushed further. He demanded comparisons with archived samples. That's when the truth, in its terrible chemical purity, began to emerge. The variances weren't anomalies. They were deliberate modifications, subtle additions that altered the drug's properties over time. The modifications pointed to an intimate knowledge of the original Thorn Labs formula, knowledge only a handful of people possessed. As Julian pieced together the horrifying truth, not just about the poison slowly affecting his son, but the architect behind it, the phone rang. Julian, haggard and wild-eyed, answered. A voice, calm and devoid of emotion, spoke. It was Elias. "Hello, Julian," the voice said softly. "Remember Adrian's medication? A true Thorn Labs original. I merely refined it." Julian gasped, the phone shaking in his hand. You monster. What have you done?" Elias's voice remained steady. "I showed you what it feels like to be helpless. To watch what you love most deteriorate, piece by agonizing piece, while you pour everything you have into fixing it, only to realize the damage was done from within, by a hand you never saw coming." Elias didn't demand anything. He didn't ask for his company back or for money. His revenge wasn't about material wealth. It was about profound, inescapable suffering. He had targeted the two things Julian valued most: his control and his son's health, making one the instrument of undermining the other. Julian was trapped. His son's life depended on a medication whose composition had been subtly altered, and the only person who knew the precise nature of the alteration was the man he had ruined. Elias didn't offer a cure. He offered nothing. He simply let Julian understand the depth of his predicament. Vance Pharma collapsed around Julian as investors fled the scandal of a company potentially poisoning its own founder's child, and the market reacted to the fundamental instability Julian had revealed. Julian, the man who craved control above all else, was powerless. He had everything Elias had ever owned: the company, the fortune, the reputation. And in that moment, none of it mattered. His world had shrunk to the sterile, terrifying reality of his son's fragile life, now held in the invisible hands of the man he had betrayed. Elias hung up the phone, the silence on his end more potent than any shouted threat. He didn't feel elation, only a profound, bone-deep weariness. Justice wasn't sweet. It was simply done. He had taken nothing from Julian that Julian hadn't first taken from him. Peace, security, the future. The price of betrayal had been paid, not in gold or blood, but in the currency of absolute, irreparable loss. Elias disappeared again, a shadow fading into the dawn, leaving Julian Vance to face the ruins of his empire and the devastating, unsolvable riddle of his son's health, forever haunted by the ghost of the man he had wronged. The Alchemist's reckoning was complete.